are back, and I think you should be able to actually hear us this time, and maybe even see Jane. Is that true? It is. I'm frozen, but whatever. You can see where I am, that I exist. That's so cool. Yay!
You do exist. Look at you there.
Yay!
How's my sound? Is it better?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, everybody's so proud of ourselves. We are so happy. Yay! I knew that something like this was going to happen on my first stream. And now that it's over, I can laugh about it.
Of course.
Okay, so you were talking about how you arrived at this, like what it was that got you to the point of doing this. And you mentioned that you were basically, your family and your dad was an early adopter of tech.
Yes, that's right. And so, that kind of inspired my first career in IT. And but then after a little while, I wanted to help people, so I went into psychology and got my degrees there, my Bachelor of Behavioural Science, and then psychology honours. The fourth year, and then I just went into research, and with a focus on positive health outcomes. Then I thought, because I tried a PhD after my honours year, and I left about halfway through, and that was one of the other things I talk about, which is failing and how to overcome failure. But I left that PhD, and I sort of viewed that as a very deep personal failure for quite a long time. But after I worked and did research for a few years, I went back and I tried again to do another PhD because I had an idea that, we can kind of utilize technology and games and the stories within games and the new all the new tech like biofeedback and all of those things we can actually utilize them and design them such that they can create positive outcomes. So I was really excited about that area. So that's when I started this PhD. So and my project was going to be quite different. Initially, I was going to make a game for adolescents to develop resilience and bolster self-esteem and self-reliance and self-compassion and develop that sense of personal resilience in teenage, in adolescence. And then I realised that there was kind of no foundational work that might inform that from like an academic perspective. I found that there was no kind of design frameworks that I could use to create a game like that. So I thought, I'll take a step back and I'll do the design framework that might then go on to inform multiple other games. So that's how I'm hoping this might be used, is to inform some game designs.
Yeah. What you're talking about in terms of there's no foundational research, and this impetus you had to create, to create a game that increased resilience in kids. Like, everybody's trying to do that with a lot of mixed results and a lot of challenges. Like, it's just hard to do. It's so weird how hard it is to do, actually. And it turns out, in part because we're not really being effectively thoughtful about how to construct those. Yeah. Which is what you figured out in this process.
Well, I think what I've tried to create here is a first step, towards a really comprehensive model. It's a detailed, at the moment, theoretical framework because it hasn't been applied yet. So we don't know how it's going to go in practice, and we don't know if the games designed with this are going to be effective. That's what I'd love to do next in some future research and some future working with game studios is to apply this model and see how easy it is to use. But it's quite detailed. So behind this wheel is, there's about 2 pages of content for each kind of pizza slice. So for each of
I know. Keys, I just read it.
Yeah. So this is a lot of detail.
It is, but it's so cool. So I want to say that one of the things that we so you did basically two research studies and put them together to make this happen, right? And each one was a giant study in and of itself. And the first was an analysis of two mental health games, Nevermind and Remission.
Yes.
And Nevermind, I think Aaron Reynolds is on the stream, I think.
Yes. I can see it there. Hi, Erin.
Hi. And the Flying Mollusks game, Nevermind, was one of the two that you studied and looked at for what were the design elements that were used in that game with the intention of creating change, right? And then and then Remission, which is about fighting cancer, quite literally. I think a lot of people actually, that one has captured kind of the popular imagination. A lot of people, when I say games for health, they mention that game, which is kind of cool. Remission.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's
early too. Like it was a while ago that it came out, so it was very kind of advanced for those times.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. I was impressed given that it came out, it was like 2005, which feels like ancient history now.
Yes, it was 2006.
2006.
Sorry, to look that up quickly.
That was 15 years ago. So what was interesting is, so you did an analysis of the mechanics of these games and how and their narrative and how they used various elements to create psychological impact. Did you have any tools? I know each of these games had studies that were attached to them in terms of efficacy. Did you also, was there any other tools you had inside your own work to figure out efficacy, or was that is that really beyond the scope of what you could do in this?
Yeah, so it is beyond the scope of what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do was not study the efficacy, but the way that you would do that usually is with a clinical trial.
Right.
Or if there's a number of clinical trials, you do a systematic review of a particular intervention to have a look at its overall efficacy. So for Remission, anyway, there was already a couple of studies out there that were registered clinical trials that kind of showed efficacy levels, and I discussed those a little bit in my analysis. But my analysis was separate from the outcomes and the efficacy. It was more looking at what is the design and how does that relate to the psychological processes of change. So it was more like a deep psychological analysis, and and this is something that I got stuck on for a long time in my PhD, was how to do that, like how to actually
no kidding
map those two things, because there really wasn't an exemplar for that. There wasn't a methodology already established for that. So I had to create one. So I had to look in similar fields of similar techniques. And I found one in education where they'd actually looked at educational and learning theory and game design, and they looked at game design patterns specifically, and matched the patterns with the learning objectives. And so they did that, but kind of doing it for psychological processes was a little bit different, but I kind of borrowed from their methodology and then applied that to my context and worked from there. So yeah, the pattern and process mapping was actually looking very specifically at all the different scenes in the game or the game contexts, and what game mechanics and game design patterns we utilised in that game context, and then working out what psychological processes were fostered through engaging with those game contexts and design patterns, and then detailing those in a kind of a very detailed and constructed way.
Which is so when you're looking at this image that's on the screen, the change keys are the change processes that relate to each of those design patterns, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So, there's a number of kind of psychological processes which need to occur in order for people to experience consciousness raising, which is the first step towards behaviour change.
Mm-hmm.
And so there needs to be like knowledge communication, and so increased awareness of the issues. And so like remission, for example, does a really great job of that because it actually puts you microscopically into a human body and allows you to experience the condition that you're experiencing, that you have, from a different perspective, and learn about it, what it looks like and the impact that it has on the environment around it. So, yeah.
Super cool. So that's the thing itself, and the way that you parsed these two games out, Nevermind and Remission. There was something really, so for those of you who don't know, Nevermind is a game that's designed to incorporate biofeedback. So it uses a heart rate monitor and tracking of, it uses a camera to track eye motion and other things, which is really cool. And one of you noted that kind of immersion and that feedback was really important to the design of the game and to its ability to act on certain of these parts of the wheel, right? And it makes me think that, like, is that when we think about like sustainable behavior change and where this stuff is going, is that kind of essential, or do you think, because it's like, wow, I see a lot of games or game like environments incorporating biofeedback, and it's complicated and it's clunky and you need additional devices and stuff. Like, are we at a point in our understanding and our execution of this stuff that we need that?
Look, I don't think there would be a case for arguing that it's needed. I don't think it's a requirement. I think there's a lot that you can do without that technology, and like as Remission shows, for example, it was actually very successful in the clinical trials. But it depends on what you're addressing. And so where biofeedback has incredible strength is where you're looking to change or adapt things like emotional regulation. Mm-hmm. So where kind of awareness of your physiological states is really key, and changing the way that you appraise your emotions and then act on them. So by appraisal, it's, you might feel a bit anxious and your heart's racing, and then you say to yourself, oh, I'm feeling really anxious. And so that means whatever's happening next is going to be really terrible, or, you have some attitudes towards your appraisal about your physiological
some attitudes.
Yes, really complicated, stay with me. And then... and then you'll kind of have those thoughts, and the thoughts will then inform your behaviour. But if you're able to actually accurately appraise that, oh, yeah, my heart rate is a bit higher, I am feeling a bit nervous, but that's valid, and everything's going to be okay, and I'll just take a deep breath now and everything will be fine. Yeah. Then that's kind of grounded you in, from the beginning, exactly the same physiological state, through to appraisal, judgment about that appraisal, and then the behavior that follows.
Yep.
So biofeedback is really useful in that kind of change, because it can actually tell you about your physiological states through in-game feedback or environment or something like that. And that's what Nevermind does really well, in a very scary way.
Yeah.
It basically provides the impetus for you to absolutely acknowledge your physiological state and calm it down, because that's the only way you'll get through the game, because the game will keep becoming more challenging if you don't. So, yeah. So, thanks, Erin. Yes, it's a great design. Yeah. So and the thing is that it can be really successful in games and game design, but it has actually been used in psychological therapy for a long time,
right?
Biofeedback already. So, having that kind of solid technology that's already utilised, we can make it a lot more interesting for people to learn about their physiology and learn how they can become more quickly aware of it. It's because it's called interoceptive awareness, this skill of being able to identify your physiological state. And that's really important to the development of emotional regulation.
Yeah, for a little while, my daughter was playing a game called, was using a tool called Mightier, which uses biofeedback also. And I know you're aware, about Mightier and those folks, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And,
yeah, absolutely.
I think that they are present in some way in other parts of your of this study, and we'll get to the second part in a little while. Yeah. But the biofeedback there. Now, the thing about the biofeedback in Mightier, which basically it does that, it obscures the screen in the same way that you describe in Nevermind, but it does it like kind of agnostic of the game. It just obscures the screen of any of the games that you have access to in the program, and it's not related to the gameplay itself, so it's not quite as compelling. And it worked with my daughter for like a month, and then it stopped working. Like she just wasn't engaged. And I think
I was going to say, how did it stop working? Was it just that she'd stopped playing?
She stopped playing. She wasn't compelled to be playing it because the game wasn't interesting. It was just a casual game. It wasn't like she's playing Zelda Breath of the Wild with my husband right now, and they're having a great time because it's beautiful and and the story is complex, and and it's got so many components, and et cetera, and they're playing it together. But it's like, if you can't layer that biofeedback onto something more interesting, I feel like it's just not going to it's not going to stick.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. It's like, firstly, it's layering it on top of maybe a simple, not as engaging kind of game. And secondly, it's not integrated into the game. The biofeedback mechanic, increasing of difficulty, isn't actually integrated within the design of the game.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a difference, because if it's within the game world and the game world is engaging, then they'll want to keep engaging with the game, but also, by way of the design, they'll be a lot more motivated to gain control over their physiological responses.
Yeah. Actually, Jane, that reminds me of another thing that was really a major aspect of your study, which was recognizing the significance of narrative design. Like that just
absolutely.
It was a huge part of how you described or of the mechanics that you found to be important in the design of these games.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like this challenge is related, because in situations where you don't have that really strong narrative, even if the narrative is just like the framing, right? That it feels like a cohesive space, like Remission, the narrative is pretty simple, right?
Yes.
But it's very compelling, especially for the target audience, because Remission is about fighting cancer cells for people who are actually going through, cancer treatment. So yeah, I just...
Absolutely. And I guess the thing about Remission and even just storytelling as a whole is it engages the person in a journey. It brings them along. It gives them, particularly in games, the ability to have agency, which allows them to develop a sense of autonomy and a sense of personal, accomplishment. And that's when you're dealing with changes or motivation changes or attitude changes or even behavior changes. That sense of autonomy and accomplishment is so crucial to long-term change. So stories can give us that sense of identifying with someone that's similar to us, and the sense of looking at your situation from a different perspective and perhaps having a different mindset about it.
Yeah.
So story was something that came out to be very important in the second study, which was the interviews with the game designers. And I wanted to make more of it in my thesis, but I was going to go way over word count. So,
you had something to say, did you? I wanted to go and dive in a little bit on that second part of the study. So you not only looked at games, you also talked to people who make games.
Yes.
To understand better, what they were thinking about, how they went about the decision-making process of making, of developing the game concept and all of that. And those were some really cool in-depth interviews, and you've got fascinating quotes all through it. Dr. Kelly Dunlap, who is standing in his Take This Org on the chat, and mentioned that's how she met Jane. Yes, that's how you met, because she was one of your interview subjects.
Yes, she was.
Which was great. And I had so much fun reading your Kelly's very smart and fabulous quotes in the dissertation, because they're so thoughtful. But
I've used alternate names because I'm ethically bound through my study ethics to not disclose who I interviewed. But if they disclose it, then that's okay. So yes, Kelly was one of my subjects that I interviewed.
I clocked a few people in that study, which was a lot of fun, despite the names that you changed. And I know you also got to interview Erin for that aspect, right? Who's the designer of Nevermind. I made confidentiality.
Thanks, Kelly.
That was really interesting, because one of the things that you got to talk about when you interviewed all these developers and leaders was not just about the design itself, but about like what their orientation and intention was going into the design process and going into the conceptualization process. Like these were people who had a mission, and they wanted to design a game for social benefit, and they were thinking about their impact on society from the beginning.
Yes.
And I'm a mission-based person. Like, this is the work I do every day. So it really resonated with me. But I think I really appreciate that you highlighted that.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important when you're doing work like this is what frame are you coming from? What perspectives are you bringing? What's the motivation? Because as designers, you would know that those kinds of perspectives and foundations actually do influence the work. And particularly when there's no kind of grounding principles, like this area is very much a practice-led area. It's the practitioners who are doing these games and creating these games, they're way ahead of the academic discussion about it, which in kind of most fields, it's the other way. Because there's been so much research, and then there's, you know, evidence-based practice, and I'm talking in a healthcare context, but in games for change or serious games, it's the practitioners who are at the forefront of doing really amazing, interesting things. And so kind of stepping back and having a look at what they bring to the role and to the big picture was really important for examining their design practice as a whole.
I think it's so interesting where you're talking about, you know, games being ahead of the research and stuff, because I think it's not just in games in general as an industry has always kind of been ahead of itself, ahead of the community. Knowledge is we are learning as we go about how what we do works as an industry, which is really funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like, even when I conceived of trying to go for another PhD, and when I applied, I don't even think Twitch was a platform then. So us now here on Twitch discussing this live with 23 wonderful people watching in, you know, this is a new thing. So, totally. Yeah. So every aspect of what you're doing, and, you know, the whole academic cycle and research is so slow, really. So it's going to be a little bit behind. But it's really fascinating what practitioners and designers are doing out there. And I could talk to them all day about what they do and why they're doing it that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else who is really fascinating to follow on these topics is Daniel Cook, who's actually my husband's business partner, but at Spry Fox. But he's not, you know, he's not trying to design mental health games at all, but he's trying to think about ways that games can bring people together, and he's diving into sociological and psychological research all the time, trying to find transferable skill, you know, clues for what are the mechanics and what are the ways, and they're always throwing a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's a really fun thing to watch. Them think through that process. I love it, actually. I really appreciate having that window into it. So the next, I want to I want to switch gears a little bit, and I'm keeping this Rosetta wheel up here because I think it's dense and there's a lot to it, and I want to give people a chance to kind of see it and refer to it in the context of our conversation, because otherwise I think it's hard to, you need some reference points. But there's one of the really challenging things is the issue of like transferability, where we know we can influence behavior in a game.
Yeah.
And we know also, and this is my soapbox these days, is we know that the way that a game is constructed also informs the way that the communities around games behave, right? Like gameplay and the way that we relate to each other inside a game, especially a multiplayer game, informs the way players think about what they can do and how they can talk to and whether or not they can harass other players in the game and around the game, right? And so I think about this a lot. But what also, like, if we're trying to actually make behavior change inside a game, how do we transfer like habits and skills outside that. And you talk about developing so the two keys that I'm thinking about are like developing substitution and intentional integration, right, as the ones that maybe do that process or help like facilitate that. So there's many pieces to what I'm asking you. Are there other keys that you think are part of that transference?
And
I
think I know how I'm going to approach this answer. Sorry, go on. Second part.
and like how do we think about that actual thing of like creating behavior change outside of the game?
Yeah, so great thoughts and great questions. And transferability and making change stick is one of the biggest problems with change interventions, whether it's kind of attitude, motivation, or behaviour change. It is the big problem, actually. And you'll know about behaviour change methods like conditioning approaches, some parts of gamification kind of conditioning approaches, which provide rewards for particular behaviour and punishment or absence of rewards for the undesired behaviours and things like that. But what I would say is behaviour change is a lot more than just addressing behaviour, because behaviour, and I've got this slide about it actually.
You talk about this. The behaviour versus
behaviour is like soup,
right?
So
cognition is the issue.
There's a lot that goes into soup, but it ends up being soup. So that's behaviour. So we've got ingredients. And the ingredients look completely different once they're soup, but they, start out. And so if you want your soup to be a little bit different, you need to go back to the ingredients. And in terms of behaviour, you're looking at things like knowledge around the subject, awareness of different perspectives around the issue, the attitudes involved, the motivations around what the existing behaviour is and how you can shift that to be more motivated. But it must start with like this, if you look up in the pink, change key 1, so informative experiences. You must have information about the issues, and then you must have emotional engagement and give people, like, this is an aha moment where it gives people the insight into how their current level of attitude and information is can perhaps be shifted, and give them insight. And so, like, my framework is for designing behaviour change outside of the game,
right?
But it certainly could be adapted in a few different ways to try and create community behaviour within the game community or within a game. And I think a lot of these behaviours that you don't actually get behaviour change until you come around to change key 7, which is in the action stage. So all the really important stuff which makes behaviour change stick, or attitude and motivation change stick, is all happening in the first quadrant of the circle. So it's change keys 1 to 4, which is about creating experiences of different perspectives to help shift attitudes, providing insight and awareness around issues, and giving people the awareness of how their behaviour impacts on the environment and how the environment can support better behaviour. But then, you change keys 5 and 6, they're all about increasing motivation, increasing awareness of your own motivation and skills through repetition and practice and things like that. And then you get into the action phase, and that's the bit where your behaviour is actually changing and you're doing things like, but by then your attitude is different, your awareness levels are different, they're greater, and so your behaviour change is a lot more likely to stick at that point. So you can't just go in straight with the swinging bat into the action stage because you've done the work of changing how you think and feel about something. Because our cognitions and our emotions are what drives our behaviors.
I think, oh gosh, that's to get kind of personal here. I've been in therapy for a while, off and on over the years, but about a year or 2 years now. And I've been trying to develop new habits to support my self-care, and one of those is meditation. And I had it's like, knowing that I should do it, trying it, and then actually being effective at it were like discrete stages that I had to get through. And then I lost the habit, and then getting back to it is another set of struggles. Like there's that, you have to keep, and that is, my gosh, it's so hard.
It is really hard. It is really hard. And like, it's even hard when you've got all the knowledge of why this is a good thing, and you've got the motivation. You want to do it. And you know the difference it makes, and you've got the skills to do it. But then it's not quite switching on. And so maybe it's something like change key 10, like intentional integration, making it easier so that it's an easier part of your routine.
Right.
It's like when you're developing new habits, you pair them with existing habits so that you can, it just becomes natural to, well, this is what I do after I brush my teeth every morning. So, and it just becomes part of the routine. So it's effortless. And so that's, that integration step is often the last and most difficult step. But you first start from that beginning of the wheel with the thoughts and the knowledge and the attitude. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Completely agree, Kelly. If behaviour change was easy, psychologists would have an easier job. Absolutely. It's hard stuff. Yeah.
Yes. This is why I employ a psychologist.
Yeah.
And why we have great clinicians on our staff at Take This, right?
Absolutely.
Totally. So I'm gonna go on to the next question, which is we kind of touched on already because we were talking. I mean, this is essentially where we're headed, but you noted that the Rosetta Wheel can be useful like outside of games, not just in terms of game design itself, right?
Yeah.
In terms of understanding motivators for action in a variety of contexts, like non-therapeutic contexts. What other applications are exciting to you? What do you think about? What is that?
That is a great question. I suppose it could be, it's obviously in contexts where change is required. And so I can see it becoming useful perhaps in educational settings
that's a good
where
point. Yeah.
kind of learning objectives. You can have, you could call this is for game design, but you could equally apply it to just kind of general interaction design. So like human interaction design, where you want to create a particular outcome. Education design and like classroom activities, those kinds of things, maybe group therapy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a game context.
That's totally true. One of the things, I'm sorry, I'm so excited to think about this, but I did in fact watch most of the Super Bowl yesterday with my pod because we're stuck inside, so we're stuck inside here in the States. There was, I was really interested to see before the game started, there was a message from the president and the first lady with a message of appreciation and honoring the people who have died of COVID, but also an exhortation to, you know, wear masks and quarantine and stay 6 feet apart and socially distance and all the things that we're totally tired of doing but still need to do. And there was also a celebration. There was the poet who from the inauguration, Amanda Gorman, who's amazing. Her poem was about kind of everyday heroes in the pandemic. And I thought, these are the compelling elements, right? The NFL was actually like designing a little behavior change module at the beginning of the NFL, of the Super Bowl game. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, that's the ultimate kind of awareness campaign, is when you can actually create that emotional engagement and aha moment where people go, oh, wow. And suddenly their perspective shifts around an issue. Like, that is the birthplace of change. That's where change happens. And then learning the skills and applying them and building that habit, and that stuff that you build onto that like a Lego tower. But it must start with that perspective shift of, okay, this is a really important issue. I'm going to pay attention. So
yeah, cool. It's fun to see this stuff play out in real life. Now, next I'm gonna bring in Zeitgeist, Dr. Rachel Cohert, who is the research director here at Take This, and she talks a lot about the psychological benefits of games. You know, kind of not mental health games, not games for health, but mainstream games. And she's talked about their power to address self-efficacy, social emotional skills. In fact, actually, both Rachel and Dr. B, our clinical director, are going to be doing parent workshops later this month, and they're going to be talking. Dr. B is and Rachel wants us all to know that she's a big Dr. Jane fan. Yes. But the parent workshop that Dr. B is doing is talking all about the social emotional skills that a bunch of games bring to the table, and how you can create connectedness through games as a family, right? Playing in the same space. As I mentioned earlier, in our house right now, that's Zelda, Breath of the Wild. But you know, this is also about, like, this isn't just about health games. Like, this model really maps to mainstream games as well. It maps like behavior change and I think especially the like perspective taking and that first part of the wheel, that first quadrant. Like, that is that's a really big part of games in general.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And even the bottom two, you know, 5 and 6, because it's right. Premised on the idea that there is agency and there is that development of self-efficacy where you have control over some aspects of the environment and aspects of your engagement with it. And so, you can really develop that sense of ownership and accomplishment through playing games, and all titles. So for sure. And that's why we love games, right? Because they give us the different perspective and they give us the opportunity to rehearse things until we get them right, and that feels so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think about too the way that Dr. B has used and others, he's not at all the only one, have used D&D therapeutically.
Yes.
For all kinds of things. And actually, we're seeing this play out in our own house because my husband is also running a D&D game for the 3 kids in the pod that we're part of. And my goodness, they're 9 and 10, and they're learning all kinds of things about compromise and about perspective taking and empathy. And wow, it's big. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that they kind of choose different characters that are quite different from themselves and just kind of role play and see how that that feels to share that.
Yeah, I think so. This is their first ever. They're still doing their first campaign, and they chose characters that are actually relatively true to type for initially. There's some aspects where they're still they're kind of trying on that. How do I act out this part? Like, my daughter's character is supposed to be overconfident, and that's not her. And so she's still trying to figure out how to do that. It's quite cute. And it's quite cute to hear my husband try to encourage her to do that. But I can see that they are, as they go and as they mature, they've been playing now for about 6 months. They're beginning to understand what that means, right?
Yeah.
And they're also like, they're really at a developmental inflection point. So I think it's, they're young, and so they're still figuring it out. But it's so cool to watch. Oh gosh, I love it.
Oh, I can imagine. I haven't seen any kind of therapeutic or social skills D&D live or been involved with it, but I certainly read and know that there's several of you hear and others that are doing this professionally, and I think it's fantastic because it provides the safe opportunity for exploring different perspectives and exploring different ways of behaving and see how that feels and engage with each other and practicing these skills in a really safe environment.
Yeah.
So I think great.
Yeah, totally. I am sorry that we have not yet mentioned pasta or garlic bread. It featured heavily in the stream last Monday. I promise I will bring in some conversation about food soon because I'm getting hungry. So
Yeah. We'll be having some garlic bread tonight for dinner. Actually, homemade pizza night tonight and garlic bread. So
well, see, it is when we finish. It's going to be 5:30 here, so I have recused myself from actually cooking tonight. So I don't know what we're going to have because I'm not in charge. I can't predict.
Whatever's made.
Whatever's made, I will happily eat. Yeah, totally. So Jane, there's some other questions I really want to ask you, and I want if folks in the chat want to hit some submit some questions. We've got some time now to do that before we move on to the last part of the stream, which is not short, but kind of before we switch gears. But I. Before we start that, I want to ask you, you mentioned some research directions you want to go in with this, or you want other people to go in, right? You're not going to die on this hill and spend your whole career doing exactly this. But what's next for this research? Where do you think it should go? And have you seen some interest? Have you been able to bring it to some devs? How do we get this into the conversation about game design?
Yeah, well, great questions, and I've thought a lot about it, and I'd like to take it further in kind of two ways. I'd like it to kind of go out there into the world on its own in a kind of a brief format, which I'm still constructing. It'll be like just a small summary paper with this, wheel and the explanations and kind of design tips behind it. So it'll be just like a small thing, but send that out into the world and have dev teams pick it up and apply it kind of on their own and see what happens and give feedback and criticism. And I one of the things that I finish my thesis off is that very thing is I want people to look at it and give me their opinion and criticize, because all of that is great feedback, which makes the work better. And then it will ultimately lead to better outcomes for people, for dev teams trying to apply it, and for people playing the games, and then for obviously positive outcomes on the other end. So I really encourage that. The second aspect is that I would really like to work further on this, and by integrating a lot of that feedback and then actually doing like kind of little studies where I work with a design team to implement this framework, and then do a study, like a trial on the game, the resulting game, and have a look at efficacy. So so that's the kind of two questions, but that'll happen over time and kind of alongside whatever research projects I'm working on at the time. Like at the moment, my research project is quite different from games, but it is still in the area of promoting positive mental health in the context of fire and emergency service workers. So we're building that framework for them, and it'll have a product at the end which will be minimally interactive, but it won't be a game or anything. But that's what I'm working on at the moment. So we can't integrate this model into that work, but alongside, my formal work, I'd love to kind of develop this further with games industry. So that's kind of where I want to take it. But if anyone wants a copy of the wheel ahead of me kind of releasing a bit of an ebook about it, then certainly get in touch, and more than happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane. And there's actually a follow-up question that we got in the chat that I'd like to highlight, which is from Paperclip, which is, what game or games are you personally playing right now, and what games, aside from the ones you've already mentioned, have you found to be kind of helpful or effective?
Great questions. Right now, I'm actually not playing any games at the moment. I am just, I'm flat out at the moment, and I'm not making enough time to play, which is not very good. I need a behaviour change intervention.
All right, I'll just fly down there.
What have I played in the past? What have I really loved? I've never actually, apart from studying them and analysing them, I've never kind of picked up for personal interest a serious game as such. But I do like the smaller games, like the non-AAA franchise stuff. Like I loved Edith Finch. I love story-rich games. Edith Finch. I'm just trying to think of some more. I should have anticipated this question and prepared it. I love mobile games. There was one a few years ago, and it was an astronaut had landed on a moon, and they were communicating with me, but it was within the game, but it came up like SMSs, and so you were messaging this person and trying to help them navigate and trying to get back. I think it was called Lifeline.
Oh, has anyone heard of that?
That was great. And that was really, you were so motivated, and you switch your notifications on for that game. You switch your notifications off for just about every app you've got, but not that one, because, when the character needed you, she needed you, and you needed to jump in. And I loved how that game came to you rather than you choosing to play the game. It was really fascinating.
But it came to you not in a your honey is replenished or something. It was like, you need to.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's, I found something interesting. Do you want to see what it is? Or, I found a radio unit, or, cool. It was really fascinating. So story-rich games, shorter games,
And now you're totally getting roped into. You're being invited to play 4-player Death Squared, World of Warcraft, a co-op version of Best Friend Forever. There's a few. So just know that this is going to be this is going to be something you're held to now by the Take This team.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, we are prompting behavior change.
Positive.
Oh, this is great.
Positive.
This is great. And a game. Oh, bury me. A game about Syrian refugees is told through SMS. Wow, that sounds pretty intense and cool.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Bury me, love.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to look that up because I think it's a fabulous mechanic.
Totally.
Because it engages you in this real time, highly emotive story. Which, it's.
Yeah, we there's another game the team was just introduced to called Betwixt. That is a mental health game, and it's totally a narrative scroller.
Yes, Kelly told me about this, and I've got the beta, and I have not played it yet.
Kelly loves it. Yeah, we were really impressed, and it's so simple. It's just a scrolling text game. Yeah.
I'm going to get onto that because just reading about it, like just the description, it was like, oh yes, this is what I like. This is great.
Kelly, you're so nice, shoving games into your hands and staring at you uncomfortably until you play them. That's really kind of you. Okay, I'm going to totally switch gears because we have there's a serious question I want to ask you that we talked about before we got started. But first, there are some important questions, and they include Zeitgeist asking, what is your favorite pasta dish?
Oh, my husband makes this incredible penne alla panna with it's just the cheesy sauce is just the best. So homemade penne alla panna.
Yeah,
really nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm a homemade baked mac and cheese. Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. Although in the last stream we were talking about just like generally favorite Italian food, and I did say that margherita pizza with fresh arugula on top, eaten on the coast of southern Italy, was my favorite. But I think that had more to do with being on the coast than anything else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, food just tastes amazing when you're on holidays, doesn't it?
Oh, gosh.
It's incredible. I had the most incredible pizza with my husband when we were in Berlin a couple of years ago. We were there for a week and we just loved it. Neither of us had ever been there before. And we were out in this square and the pizza was just crispy and thin, but it had just a little bit of substance, and I can't even remember the ingredients on it, but it was just the best pizza I've ever had. It's probably just was Berlin in general, really, though.
I think so. I mean, I think, yeah. It really, that's the fascinating thing about food is that it is about the food, but it's really also about who you eat it with and where you are and how you're feeling when you do so.
It's the whole experience. So yeah.
Yeah.
Pizza
totally.
is meant for the body.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh wait, there was one other ridiculous question. Hold on, that my team submitted. Hold on, I have to go back and find it. Okay. Kelly wants to know, you, Rachel, Dr. B, and Dr. Kelly are on a boat which crashes, and there's only room for you and two others. Who do you save and who do you offer up to the sharks?
Does it have to be me and two others?
Apparently, you.
Can't I just go swimming with the sharks and then there's three remaining in the boat?
Well, it looks like Dr. B already sacrificed himself as shark bait, which was rather dramatic of him. But I suppose that I don't really want to lose you, but I don't want to lose any of this crew. So
No.
drama.
See, well, this is what I was going to say, because I am Australian, and I did swimming for a lot of my life. So my goal would be to jump in and grab hold of a shark fin and, just cruise into the coastline. So
well, that's brilliant.
Seems like a fairly realistic plan to me.
Sure.
I've been known for my realistic plans.
That's great. Okay. So now I'm gonna, I'm gonna see if this makes my camera pop back up. I'm gonna shift to a new view here. Oh no, it's still frozen. Oh well. That's nice. Wait, there's another serious question, which is, what is the most compelling engagement loop you've ever experienced in a game? Oh, yeah, I don't know, or anyone, like, what is the most compelling engagement loop you've ever experienced in a game? I'm a casual gamer, and so like engagement loops in casual games just aren't like it's less of a thing.
I would probably have to say like that Lifeline mobile game where the game comes to you, but it comes to you with such a short, interesting, thing that you need to engage with, problem that you jump in. And I think this is what makes it successful, is that it doesn't require you to play for long periods of time. So you can integrate it into your day very easily.
Yeah,
and
totally.
The game will come to you and you jump in, you have a conversation for a while and you check a couple of things and then you jump out and get on with your day. And so it just feels like real life, which makes the game a bit more meaningful as well, because it feels like, just the little check-ins that you'll get from your family and your good friends kind of speckled throughout the day. And you just integrate them into whatever else you're doing. So yeah, I would say that. And so, but I'm talking about, that's what makes things engaging for me when I can fit them in to my day.
Right. I know, because we've got some other answers in the chat which are like, the grinding mechanic in Epic RPG, and then that like the leveling up. There's a World of Warcraft answer, I think, kind of. And yeah, I mean there's a lot of different ways to engage, but I wonder if like that idea of being able to pop in and out is more relevant when you're talking about behavior change games and health games, where you want to change habits outside of a game, and a game that forces you to come in and out quickly, like keeps it part of the world. Like if you want to escape or really engage in play and exploration, or really engage socially in a game, like that's one thing, and that's what certain games are really fabulous for, right, and compelling. But then but yeah, popping in and out has a very different and maybe separate use case.
Absolutely. I feel like it becomes more of an integrated with your reality type situation. So it's just another layer of your life, rather than something that you switch off and do and play. It's just this kind of integrated experience in your reality. So it would be good for things like, nudges and tweaks and just reminders and things like that of the information or the attitude change or the behavior change.
There was actually there's a game just had a Kickstarter, Amaru from Six Wing Studio. It's trying to be a self-care kind of resilience app, and it was designed to force you to leave the game for periods of time and go do things in the real world, right? but then bring you back because you had to then, participate in those behavior changes. And like that going in and out and being invited explicitly to do so is really, it's super interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it has a lot of potential to be explored, particularly, for mobile games and games which, I could even see how that could be integrated with biofeedback and, Apple Watch and the game comes to you perhaps when your heart rate's a bit higher or something like that.
Yeah. Gosh, that would be really powerful because, we aren't exactly reliable self-reporters in general as human beings.
We're terrible. Generally, unless you have, specifically tried to develop that skill, our interoceptive awareness as a whole is not very good. We're not great at identifying how we feel physiologically and how that informs our emotions and thoughts. But if we can get good at that skill, then we can get a bit better at appraising that stuff and adapting to it.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I keep coming back to this topic. Like it's been a little bit disorganized of a conversation, but I keep coming back to this topic because, like, I know it's possible, and I know it's the thing that when we really unlock the full potential of these design elements, I think it's going to be kind of amazing. But I haven't really seen it be all that effective in a broad sense yet.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess this is why I kind of did the work, because it's a bit more foundational and not yet applied. But you're right. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think there's a lot of applications in kind of health and education and things like that for models like this to help design games for positive change. But the games that have been successful through evidence like clinical trials, they've not been based on any game design frameworks as such, or like foundations like what I've done. They've kind of brought on their own team of specialists and worked out kind of independently, like they've reinvented the wheel every time for every different game. And some of these approaches really work, and you can learn a lot from them. There's game development projects that have had like game playbooks published about their process and how they approached it and what their assumptions were and what their design techniques were, and published design directions and then design outcomes and those kinds of things. And that's incredibly valuable, but it's very specific to the problem that they're addressing,
right?
And it's specific to their what they're designing, and so it's only so applicable in a variety of contexts. So what I tried to do with this is to make it as specific and informative as possible, but with the potential to be applied a bit more broadly. And we're yet to find out if that's been successful. But I think you're right. I think there's a lot of potential, but we've seen so far mainly variability in that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to put it. I'm gonna we're back to puns in the chat, but there are some new questions that showed up that are really cool.
Okay.
The first is, wait, hold on. Where'd it go? There was a cool question. Oh wait, for the first one was this is from Kelly actually. What is the ethical boundary around a game that asks you or guilts you into play in the name of health, like Duolingo?
Yeah, I haven't actually played Duolingo, so I can't comment on the design of it. But I do have an opinion about this question, not in the context of Duolingo, though. There's this very strong ethical boundary, and it should be really solid. And that is fully informed consent needs to occur before, because what we're talking about is intervention design. And so when you actually provide an intervention to change something about someone, that is, you have an ethical responsibility to fully inform them about what's going on and to ask permission, gain consent, and so guilt would be a tactic that is unethical. I think it. What am I trying to say here? Yeah, it seems like an underhanded, like, you know, these dark patterns of design, trying to engage you in an underhanded way or trick you or manipulate you in some kind of unknown way. And yeah, I think that really dances around the ethical boundary too close. Too close, I think. But yeah, I mean, I suppose things like encouragement or providing feedback, which may have the resulting emotion of guilt. I don't know whether that could be considered okay, but yeah, I think we're kind of playing around the boundary with things like that, and I think designers need to be really careful, and absolutely always design with the intention to get fully informed consent about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think that's the danger of gamification too, is that it's used to pull people in as opposed to actually create.
Well, the thing is the difference between an interactive thing, putting change on you or requiring change from you, and an experience which provokes you to, or which fosters you to think, change your own perspective, and then change your own behaviour. It's like the onus of the change is within yourself. In my model, it's providing the tools to change perspective, attitude, motivation, and behaviour. Whereas gamification models, a lot of them, and games provide manipulations in order to generate the desired behaviour.
Yeah.
So that's an important difference, and it's much more appropriate with health interventions or educational interventions to do fully informed and then provide the necessary tools and experience so that the person adopts change within themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, so many of you have done Duolingo and then just gotten angry. You totally.
What do they do? Do they send you reminders? You haven't done your, practice for so many days and you're losing points. And if you don't come back today, then is this kind of this gentle jibing or?
I mean, yeah. The owl cries. Oh gosh, that's awful. That's
what? You're hurting owls?
Oh, I don't want guilt trips. I mean, I have to be honest, as a parent, I do use guilt trips occasionally. But I also what you're trying to do with kids is you're trying to give kids intrinsic motivation. You're trying to, help them understand, and positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement. Gosh.
Absolutely. Like if they don't develop that sense, and, I should have brought that term up earlier, but you're absolutely spot on. It's all about developing intrinsic motivation, because that if you don't have that to begin with, then no matter what you do next, it's not going to stick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super right.
So they need to be able to want to do what you want to do themselves and see the value in it. And then they'll be more likely to do that.
And I'm being schooled by my clinicians that negative reinforcement is a good thing. Thank you, everyone. That's why you're the experts.
Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Yeah.
They all have a place. Yeah.
Conditioning, doozy.
Yeah. But this like guilt thing is I'm just not into.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last call for questions related to the Rosetta wheel and related, because I want oh, that link is kind of a mess, but I want to go into something else, because I'll preface this by saying that I had the great pleasure of first meeting you, Jane, at GDC 2019. When you were able to present some of this research in kind of a preliminary form, right? Which was really cool. Also, congratulations. That's great. I just finished reviewing a bunch of submissions for GDC 2021, which will be this summer. I'm now on the advisory board. Yeah, some cool stuff. But one of the things, and then I got to you were in the midst of that trip, you were dealing with the imminent passing of your dad, and so we talked a lot about that because it was pretty intense, and you talked a lot publicly on Twitter about the process of grieving, and that's been really relevant to me because and I've mentioned this before. My dad is 2.5 years into a battle with stage 4 cancer and has stopped treatment, and we're facing, I don't know how long it's going to be, but the end. And that processing of grief is, it never goes away, right? And it never leaves you when it's happening. And I'm grieving both the end of his life and the beginning of that time that I know is coming when he won't be around anymore. And I really appreciate that you did that publicly.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. It's impossibly hard, and it's something that you for my particular experience, that I just was not able to cope with very well at all, and talking about it publicly was also really hard. But it was kind of one tiny things that I could do that would every so often, or quite regularly actually, kind of connect me in a serendipitous way to someone else having the same exact feeling or experience. And that alone was incredibly powerful and therapeutic. And so it was this idea that, and I tweeted a lot about anticipatory grief, because my dad was ill for many years before he died with chronic heart disease. And so he was kind of declining, and towards the end, he needed a lot more help. So I was supposed to finish my PhD at the end of 2018. And I kind of slowed right down so that I could be a lot more involved in my dad's care. And I saw him every day, and I was involved in his physical care towards the end. And, I'd go and visit him. And then on the way back from the visit, I'd sit in the car and just have a big cry, outside the hospital, and tweet that, just my heart was shattering into a million tiny pieces. And how can I possibly go through this experience of caring for my dad and watching him, nursing him to his death? And and it's, you're right, Kelly, it's the shared experience which makes it easier. We're humans, we're built for each other, and we're built to form community and help each other. And sometimes when we don't have the tools and we don't have the energy, we have adapted so that we reach out for support, and then that support comes in. Yeah. And so I think that's what I was trying to do, was just share the pain of, the intolerable pain. And nothing does make it better, but somehow with the shared experience, you do actually get through it. You do move through it. And it's coming up for 2 years now since my dad died. He died 5 days after I got home from the GDC trip. So, and I wasn't going to go, but he said that he really, really wanted me to go, because it was something that I had wanted to do for some time. And and I was awarded with a scholarship to go there, and so I was extremely fortunate that I had a lot of support in getting myself there, and people who were involved wanted me to come, and my family was encouraging me to go, and my dad especially said, no, go. And, I want to hear all about it when you get back. And then I did. I went straight from the airport to his bedside at the hospital, and we were basically straight into vigiling mode when I got back from that GDC trip. And I felt compelled to just talk about my experience and share it in that public way. And so many people came out of the woodwork, and most of them were had sent me private messages. So I had kind of random DM exchanges with people who were just sharing the most painful but heartfelt experiences and how they got through them. And I think that's the thing, is you connect with people who've had shared experiences, but they're at a different place now. And so you can kind of almost connect yourself to dealing with it in the future. You don't deal with it in the present, but you know that at some point you will deal with it better. And that helps get you through.
Oh, that's such an interesting thing. Yeah, I that's a really powerful statement of, that by being in community, you can see the totality of the journey, as in addition to just the thing that's happening right now.
That's right. Yeah. And it's someone that wrote a little story about it, about, you're out on the sea in a ship, and grief is like, it's a shipwreck. And so, the ship's destroyed and you're washed ashore, and then the waves just crash over you, and they're 50 foot high, and they're just coming all the time, and they just crash over you. But eventually they kind of slow down a little bit, and they get a little bit smaller. They still come, and they still take your breath away when they do come. But, that you, through all the coughing and spluttering, you get through the crashing of the waves, and you can stand up on the seashore and reflect on the shipwreck in front of you, and know that all of that pain is actually just a mirror of love. And that's what it is.
That's really powerful. Yeah. When I despite this ridiculous pandemic, I made a 5-week trip to see my dad, who lives on the other side of the country, in the fall. Yeah. And I was able to spend some time with his partner's adult daughters, who have also lost their dad. And, we shared, they shared with my brother and I the experience and the grieving process and the things. I tried to ask them, what did you wish you do? What were you glad you did in those end times? And that was really, really helpful. And it was profound to be given the opportunity to reflect on what I wanted to know and how to have someone to talk to about it in that time. But I that's a very personal and direct experience. And I find it so interesting that we're doing that publicly on Twitter.
Yeah.
You know, there's an American, a U.S. Journalist. He's the host of NPR Weekend Edition, Scott Simon. And a few years ago, he live tweeted the experience of the vigil that he kept in the hospital with his mother, and I think turned it into a book.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying to you before the stream, I was actually going to do like a paper on it, an autoethnography, it's called, an analysis of social emotional processing through sharing grief and emotional thoughts on Twitter, and how you can actually kind of use the tool and the interactions and sharing your feelings as they kind of, because their emotions are transient, right? And so you're not feeling that exact tweet all of the time. That's just what you're feeling in a momentary sense. But there's all these different emotions. But by sharing this kind of pattern of emotion, you're stitching together this quilt of what grief looks like, but then you're giving that quilt to everyone to share, and it's so social emotional processing and how it can foster a greater sense of coping individually in the face of grief. And I think there's something there. And there's been lots written about social emotional processing, but not necessarily in the context of sharing grief on Twitter. So
yeah. It is an amazing spot to do that in. I thank you, Jane. Thank you very much for that. Both personally and for sharing it here, and reiterating that the power of that shared experience.
It's great. And I mean, you've got it right underneath your org name. You're not alone, and I think that's the bottom line here, is that it's when you reach out and when you connect with people, even through difficult times, like especially through difficult times, it's so powerful. Yeah. And I think, the more we can be there like that, as communities, then the better it is, even with painful, hard stuff. So, yeah.
Amen to that. Thank you. Jane, I want to really thank you for coming on the stream today. This has been a really fun conversation. Yeah. I'm delighted that and honored that we were able to highlight your work, which I think is very important, and I'm excited to hopefully have it see its legs, see it run and see it develop into something really useful.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I know you were super nervous, so was I. And of course we did in fact we had plenty of tech problems. We will resolve those before I stream again. But it was awesome, and you did great, and you're thoughtful and engaging, and it's really fun to have this conversation with and this chat was delightful. It was super informative.
It was a lovely chat.
Yeah. So for the inaugural Take This Talks Dev interview, yay! So on topics related to development, we'll have one of these every month. The what is this? The second Monday of every month. We'll have take this one. So the next one is March 8th, and I'll be interviewing Ed Fries, who's a longtime veteran of the game industry, was involved in the founding of Xbox, and has developed a venture fund with the express purpose of developing a network of leaders. So really fostering the community aspect. We keep talking about community and connection and the importance of shared experience. And this is in the indie dev community, which is so important. And so I'm really excited for that. It's going to be a major about face in terms of topic, but really important also. So that's next month. Next week is Take This Plays with Dr. Kelly Dunlap and Dr. B. They will be continuing their playthrough of Night in the Woods, which I think is going to be a lot of fun and really interesting. That also has a lot of emotional weight to it, but it's a great game, and it's really wonderful to have Kelly and Dr. B taking us through that.
The re-woodening.
The re-woodening. Yeah. So it is slightly before the end of the stream, but I think we have covered this wonderful topic really well, and I appreciate everybody being on here, and I hope you all have a lovely end of your day or rest of your day, Jane.
I'll be getting back on with my work now.
Yep. Carry on. And we'll see you all next week. Same time, same place.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eve.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.